I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar entitled, Am I in the Right Job? How to Know When It's Time to Go, presented by Hallie Crawford. Hallie's been a certified career coach and a national career expert for 19 years. Her company, Create Your Career Path, the team of coaches and have helped thousands of people worldwide identify and transition into their dream career, effectively navigate their job search, and enhance their performance at work. Hallie is regularly featured as a career expert in the media, including US News, Forbes.com, The Wall Street Journal, CNN, and Fox Business News. For more information about their services, please visit www.halliecrawford.com. And that is certainly enough for me. I'm going to turn it over to the main event here. Welcome, Hallie.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. That was wonderful. Perfect. And thank you all for being here today. As we said, greatly appreciate it, especially if it's a day off for you. And as I was telling Sam earlier, we are based in Atlanta, and when I was exercising this morning, it was like 80 degrees and tons of humidity. So there's sun shining in. I may need to shift a little bit just to make sure that the lighting is okay as we go today. And, you know, it was one of those hair days, too, that I had to figure that out. Thrilled to be here with you all to discuss how do you know if you're in the right job or even in the right long-term career path? And how do we know and kind of make the judgment call, if you will, of is it time for me to make a change or a shift or move on? One of the first things I wanted to share with you all just really quickly is that I understand how this feels. This is me when I was in my early 20s. I'm 47 now. I've been coaching and training for over 20 years. But I had several different jobs that I couldn't stand. And the last position that I had, all of my friends and family said, you know, it's a great job. Why would you leave? You're crazy. Don't even think about it. And I knew that there was something off, but I wasn't sure if it was time to make a move or not. So if you fast forward about 20 years, I figured everything out, fortunately. I had an early life crisis, is what I call it, in my late 20s. And I finally figured out what I wanted to do career-wise and launched my business. And at the time, I actually lived in Chicago. I lived there for about 8 years before moving to Atlanta. So here I am today, thoroughly enjoying what I do and thrilled to share the tips and advice that we give to all of our clients. So the things that we're going to be talking about today are tips and advice that we give to our clients all day, every day, as well as advice that helped me figure out how to know what the right next step is for me. Just FYI, we know that there's a lot going on for people due to COVID and working remotely, and we are trying to provide as much additional helpful information related to this situation on our career blog. So for any other information, free content, please visit our website and check out our blog. We're trying to do as much as we can there to help people because we know that a lot of us are struggling with what's going on. So moving into that right away, here are the things that we have been finding or hearing from our clients who come to us for job search or career direction or whatever it is. But even existing clients that we've worked with for a little while, they are realizing now that they're working remotely that their coworkers in some cases were a critical piece to their enjoyment about their job or their sense of fulfillment. And they're not as happy in what they're doing anymore. And it's a really interesting phenomenon to say, you know, I might like some of the tasks I'm performing, but the main thing I really liked was going to the office and, you know, seeing my colleagues. So we're hearing people say that. We're also hearing people say, I really miss the office and I'm less motivated working from home. Like a client said last week, she's like, I'm dragging. This is hard to stay on the ball with things when I'm working remotely. And then obviously we do have those clients out there who are like, I'm loving working remotely. This is fantastic. Everyone is different and feels differently about it. So please know, number one, that you're not alone. This is normal, all of these different emotions. And number two, because of COVID, we do want you to think about, you know, is your dissatisfaction with your current job due to working remotely or something else related to this COVID impact? Consider how long you have felt kind of unsatisfied in your job, how long it's been for you before deciding what kind of move you need to make even if you need to make a move at all. And obviously this is what we're going to be talking about today, but I wanted to kind of frame this out at the very beginning to have you all consider everything else that's going on that is impacting our dissatisfaction. We're stressed at home, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to be practical and realistic about considering making a move. One of the other things I wanted to say about this being realistic thing is we've all heard before, do what you love and the money will follow, right? And I would say from my own experience that to a certain extent, yes, that's the case. But on the other hand, not necessarily, because the money didn't just fall into my lap and follow. I worked very hard to grow my business to where it is today. Would I say that it didn't feel like work as much as my other jobs did? Absolutely. So what we also want you to consider when you're thinking about job or career satisfaction, everyone, is we want you to be going for that, your job is never going to be perfect. We are never going to have a job that we love every single minute of it. I just think, honestly, that's unrealistic. What you want to go for, or kind of target, if you will, is you want to have a position or job where the good stuff about it, the things that you really enjoy, whether it's the environment, the tasks, et cetera, that good stuff so far outweighs or outshines the bad things, the things that you don't like as much, that you barely notice those. And that's how I feel about what I do running my business. There are things that I don't want to do, Excel spreadsheets, work on my financials, things that I'm not as great at. And I have to do those, obviously, but I barely notice those things because there's so much more of my time that is spent doing something I really enjoy. So I just wanted to frame this out for you from a practical perspective that we are all about helping people find their ideal dream job and enjoying their work as much as possible. But we also don't want people to put so much pressure on the process to say, well, if I just found this one job like a needle in a haystack, then everything would be perfect. You got to be practical and realistic about it as well. So now that we frame that out, let's talk about our specific agenda for today. So first, we're going to discuss why it's important to have career satisfaction. We're going to dive right into the 8 red flags, kind of as a quiz or checklist for each of you, to know if you're in the wrong fit. And we'll tell you kind of how to rate yourself on that as well. We're then going to discuss how to define and why it's important to define fulfillment first when you're thinking about the right career path. And we'll review briefly our ideal career model because that's going to really help you know all of these pieces, but this will help you know as well as a checklist if you are in the wrong fit and it is time to make a move, okay? So just wanted to remind you really quickly, this is being recorded, as Sam said. If anyone would like a copy of the presentation, if you want the PowerPoint slides, please feel free to email us. We'd be happy to share those with you. The email appears on the screen here now. It's admin@halliecrawford.com. Just shoot us an email anytime. Even if it's weeks later, we're happy to share those slides with you. All right, so why is it important to have job satisfaction and be in the right fit? There are studies that come out, I have found every 3 to 5 years, give or take, by the Gallup organization, different organizations, the Conference Board, et cetera, that will do these studies. And 9 times out of 10, pretty much every time, they show us why or how many people are not satisfied in their job. So 51%, not being satisfied at work really takes a toll on your quality of life, not just inside of work or at work, but also in your personal life too. Because as humans, we're integrated beings. And so when there's a problem in one area, it just naturally bleeds into other areas of our lives. And finally, those people that are not as satisfied in their work are twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression over time and other issues. So it's a bad thing. We spend a lot of time at work. We need to be satisfied. One of the things that it would be good for you to think about in order to start to consider whether you're in the right fit or not is the items on this next slide. So we've had clients come to us all the time, and when we ask them why they're in their jobs, they'll say, oh, well, somebody told me I'd be good at it. Or I took this career test, and so I figured I would just try it. Or I fell into it. So there are lots of different reasons why we end up in the wrong fit, and they're listed here. It was offered to us, so we took it. Other people thought it was a good idea. Some of us will stay longer in jobs because of the salary. We call that the golden handcuffs. Had a client once who worked in pharmaceutical sales, and she said, it seems like, Hallie, they kind of know when we're all getting, unhappy and stressed out, and they throw a new phone at us or a new car or something just to keep us around. And one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later is taking a career assessment can help you figure this out. But for this particular slide for right now, I want you to do some thinking, even if it's for homework tonight, about why are you in your current job? What got you into this in the first place? Because you want to evaluate whether you got into it for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. And as you can imagine, the right reasons are things that come from you, and it's fulfilling and rewarding, and I'm excited. And the wrong reasons would be, like one client said to us, well, everyone in my family is either a doctor or a lawyer, so I'm a lawyer. That's not the right reason. You've got to have a lot more. So consider that first. The second thing I want to tell you, and we'll do our first poll here in just a second, is I want you to think about how dramatic over time, as you're considering this, how dramatic a change you actually need to make in order to be satisfied. Because here's the deal, everyone. Our clients, when they come to us and when they figure out what the right next step is, they kind of fall on a spectrum or a range of, some people will come and say, I'm pretty satisfied, but I want to be prepared for the next step if things change, or I want help with strategic career planning in the long run so that I'm at choice about my career. Some people will say, look, I'm unsatisfied in some areas, but I'm really satisfied in these others, and so I'm totally confused about what to do and how do I figure this out. And in this case, if this is you, you need to separate what works in your current job and what doesn't work. And you can use our model to do that. In a few minutes, I'll show you that, so that you can then decide, for example, maybe I just need a change of industry or a change into a different organization, but stay in the same role and maybe in the same industry. And then finally, the people who are very unsatisfied, they may need to consider a larger change. So Sam, if we could get this first poll started, one of the big points as you all are completing this poll for us that I want you to understand is that 9 times out of 10, you do not have to make as dramatic a change as you think you need to in order to be satisfied. That's the good news. That the majority or a lot of our clients will end up making a course correction versus doing something completely different. So small changes in what you're doing can have a large impact on things. All right.
Great, Hallie. So we just got the results from your poll here. So it looks like 73% of attendees on the line are not feeling consistently engaged at work, and 27% are.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks everybody for doing that, and Sam, thanks for sharing it. So here's the deal, everyone. We also want you to think, kind of percentage-wise, how often are you feeling engaged and satisfied, and how often not? Because this isn't just a gut instinct thing that we want you to just jump into the next thing. We really want you to be practical about considering this change and really thinking about, okay, what are the things that need to be changed or adjusted, and how do I make that happen? How small of a change can I make in order to find the right path? Because ideally, that's better if you make, a change that's a little bit easier. So this is the bad news. Too many people are unhappy. The good news is that you can be engaged and fulfilled in what you do. And I do want you to keep in mind, as I just said a moment ago, usually the change that you need to make is less dramatic than you think. So also, please don't think that just because you don't make a huge change in your career path that you did something wrong. Sometimes our clients will say, well, when we're brainstorming career ideas or when I'm thinking about your model, like, career paths that are related or similar to what I'm doing now, those are the ones that tend to come up. Is that because I'm just used to that career path and so I'm thinking too narrowly or small? And obviously that's what we do as coaches. It's our job to help them, answer that question and help them figure it out. But normally, think about it this way, everyone. You chose your career path for a reason. Hopefully there's no one on the line that, is in a job that they offered it to you and you were like, no way, Jose, that sounds crazy. I'm going to hate this job. And then suddenly you said, okay, I'll take it. We chose what we're doing now for a reason. So there's usually a few nuggets in there that you can pick out and say, okay, I'm on the right track here. I need to make these changes over here. So let's talk about number 2, the 8 red flags to know if you are really in the wrong fit and you need to make a more dramatic change. So the first 4 are on this slide. So I'll give us a moment here to take a look at these. So first of all, If you dread getting out of bed every single morning, it's not just Monday mornings, but it's pretty consistent and it's a pretty strong feeling, then that's a big clue to you're not in the right fit. What I will tell you all to just help dose of reality here is that there are times that I would rather not get out of bed in the morning. Absolutely. There are times that I'd rather not go to work, but the majority of the time I'm actually pretty excited to do it. So it is possible to feel that way. And I have not felt this dread in a very long time, at least not this strongly. Number 2 red flag is if your work relationships and the performance or your performance, if they're suffering, if you're noticing that you're a little crankier or shorter with people and it's not due to COVID, okay, that's where we got to be careful here, and your performance is suffering as a result, that's a big red flag. You need to consider that too. If you feel like you're working all the time and, you're just, it's too much or whatever it is and you're stressed out, or that you're working even just a little bit, but if you're not getting any satisfaction from what you do, literally at all during the course of your day, big red flag there. And just by the way, in my book, you should be getting honestly, 75% satisfaction out of the majority of what you do every day. Okay, so it can be that high. And then number 4 red flag is that if you've noticed that you started to slack off and don't have a ton of motivation, and again, it's not due to COVID, but this happened before COVID, and it's been a long time or whatever it is, that's a red flag and possible clue that you're not in the right fit either, because we should be excited and can be excited to go to work. We can have good, strong, solid relationships at work. It's not going to be all the time, and it's not going to be perfect. But you should enjoy working with your colleagues, at least to a certain extent. And you should have at least a sense of fulfillment, accomplishment, or some sense of satisfaction from what you're doing or meaning. And we find that that's important for most professionals out there. The last 4 of the 8 red flags are, number 1, if you feel like you have to become someone else or just kind of naturally become someone else at work, meaning you can't be your true self or be as authentic as you would like to be or should be able to, then that's a problem. If your job is not making use of your natural talents and abilities, your strengths, on a regular basis, I would say 50% and above at least, that's a problem too. And if you spend most of your time, even outside of work, virtually, remotely these days, complaining about your job, that's a huge red flag. And then finally, and this one may sound a little bit funny, but if you fantasize or have dreams about quitting or being fired or let go, huge red flag there. Quick story here, and actually while we're talking about this, let me pull up the results, so to speak, how you know how dramatic a change you need to make on this next slide. We had a client once, I was working with her, probably our 4th coaching call. And we got into the conversation and we were probably about 3 or 4 minutes in already. And I was like, you sound really good today. What's going on? What happened or changed? And she said, I got fired. And she was just so excited because she had been so miserable in her job. And at least for her at the time, she didn't feel comfortable and didn't I don't want to say have the courage because that's too negative, but she didn't feel comfortable quitting without something else. But having that lifted from her by, some other force, so to speak, she just lit up and felt so much better. She didn't realize exactly how much her job was weighing on her. So we do know that sometimes people have this feeling, and it's normal if that's the case for you. So here's the deal. 1 or 2 red flags. You may just be going through a rough patch. You probably want to sit tight and reevaluate in 3 months. Use the tools that we're talking about today, but reevaluate your situation in a few months to see if it's any better given COVID and anything else going on. 3 or 4 red flags, you're probably not in the right career, but you may be closer to your ideal job than you think you are. We would have you write down what works and what doesn't as 2 separate lists, okay? Here are the things I like about what I do. Here are the things I don't like. That will help you be more practical. Seeing it in black and white helps you be less emotional about the whole thing and also evaluate, okay, what's going on and how bad is it really? And then 5 or more red flags, it's definitely time to make a change. So let's go ahead and do our next poll here, which is based on the red flag test, so to speak. And we are curious how many people feel they fall into one of these categories or which one they fall into based on the red flags. And just by the way, Sam, as you're pulling up the poll, I just wanted to let everybody know that we don't expect you to, even if you're close to one of these kind of scenarios, just get a gut instinct about where you fall, okay? So we'll give you a moment here to complete the poll. And as a reminder, feel free to ask us for the PowerPoint so you actually have this in hand and you can do the test later. I love quizzes, so I always like doing that.
And it looks like here 70% are saying that maybe they are not the right fit based on this red flag test, and 30% are.
Okay, good. Thank you for sharing, and thanks everybody for participating. So think about the nuances, like we said, everyone, how dramatic a change you think you may need to make. And we're going to talk about our career model, which will help you kind of evaluate different options too. Did want to just share with you all, if anyone is still a little bit uncertain about how dramatic a change they need to make, or would like additional information and advice based on what we're talking about today. And also, it's an opportunity to learn more about our coaching services. Free consult with one of our coaches, we would be happy to offer that for you. Just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. We'd be happy to set that up to give you some bonus advice, but also learn about coaching too. All right, so let's talk about tip number 3. And I looked at the Q&A box there for a minute. I have to be good about not doing that. I get excited when people ask questions, but I get distracted. All right, so we will do Q&A at the end. Let's talk about number 3, and this is defining fulfillment. So here's the deal. The reason why we have our clients think about what's going to be most fulfilling and rewarding to them first in their job is because we want them to brainstorm or really think outside the box a little bit more than they would otherwise. And what I mean by that is if you get practical too soon with your career ideas when you're considering alternative options, okay, then you're going to cut yourself off at the knees a little bit with your creative thinking. So we always want people to define what would be meaningful and rewarding to them first so that they've got a lot of ideas on their list, because it's easier then to cut those things back, cut down your list based on practicality and reasonable expectations from that list. And also, if you brainstorm fulfillment first or think about that first, you're going to get closer to something that you would really enjoy versus just kind of staying in this little box. So let me pull up the rest of this slide here. Okay. So 4 ways to define fulfillment are on the slide right now. So first of all, one of the first things that you can do to help think about, like, how do I define fulfillment? What does that mean? Is to think about how you define success. And success can change for us over time in our lifetime based on what our priorities are. I'll tell you that one of my values, honestly, not to be mean, but one of my personal values wasn't family. It wasn't at the top of my list until I had my son, who's now 12. And family is a huge thing now once I became a mother. It's not that I didn't like my family before. It's that I just had a different set of values around that, okay? So defining success and thinking about what success means to you right now and your current stage of life is a really important thing. And I would journal about it for a few minutes. It's not just a one-shot deal. Like, give yourself like 10 minutes to really journal and think about, what does success mean to me at this point in my life? The second thing that you can do to define fulfillment is to identify your interests and think about those things that you do inside of work where you lose track of time, but also outside of work too. So what are my hobbies? And even though you may not pursue a career path in your hobby because that doesn't make sense, it would take the joy out of it, and it may not pay you what you need to be paid, et cetera, think about what that hobby, like, why is it appealing to you? So what are those things that you do naturally in your life where you lose track of time? And think about why those are appealing to you. Dig underneath, because that can give you a sense of, what some common themes are about what's fulfilling and rewarding to you. I do this because there's a sense of freedom. I do this because I get a sense of creativity out of it, for example. So one of my values, actually, personal and professional values, is risk. And I happen to love like horseback riding and snow skiing. And part of why I like those things is not just about being outdoors, et cetera, but it's the risk involved. I kind of like pushing the limit just a little bit. Now I'm 47, I don't do that as much these days, but you get the point. The third thing that you can do is to think about and journal about your ideal day at work and what qualities would that have for you. And finally, we do want you to start to identify your top 3 career values. This is the thing that we find is the most useful for our clients to define fulfillment. And the way that we have them do this is by thinking about a peak experience in their lives. And we have them start with a personal experience versus a work experience, because then they're going to get closer to what their true values are as a person. A peak experience could be a moment in time in your life. It could be a period of time in your life. It doesn't matter, but it's a moment when you felt jazzed, excited, on top of the world. And if you write about that and write out what the qualities were about that, a little bit less about the details and more why was that experience cool for you, you're going to start to be able to pull out some of your values. Now, we do recommend that you share your peak experience with someone else. We do this with our clients, so you can share it with us, a friend, family member, whatever. But when you share that peak experience with someone else, they objectively are able a lot of times to pick out a few things that you may not have noticed and see themes in what you're saying. So highly recommend that you do this values exercise to define fulfillment first, okay? And you want to ask yourself also, does your current job bring you fulfillment in some way, shape, or form? And how you define fulfillment, remember, is based on what's important to you. And you may say, look, Hallie, I don't really feel passionate about that much in my life. That word passion, for example, may be too strong. You may say, I just want to have a sense of satisfaction from my job. That's okay. Whatever it is, you want to define what it means for you to do the work that you do. Whether it's I enjoy the fact that, my company is growing and building, or it could be that I enjoy the impact that we have on our customers or the service or product that we bring to the market. It could be that I love creating stories as a marketer to tell the story of my organization because it's a creative process. Whatever it is, think about what fulfillment means uniquely for you, okay? Now, the fourth thing that we want you to be doing is we want you to also review the ideal career model, and I'll show you this in just a moment. This will also help you determine if you are in the right fit or not, and again, how big of a change you need to make, okay? And so for those of you out there that are like, well, what if I'm not really sure if if I need to make a change at all or not, the career model is going to help you with this enormously. Sorry, I was talking too fast there. So the career model helps you be objective about where you're at in terms of your level of satisfaction. And also, it helps you determine how dramatic a change you need to make. Because what the model shows you is the 8 things that you need to consider in order to determine your ideal long-term career path, all the necessary components of being satisfied in a job. And we encourage you to review each piece one by one, step by step, even as a checklist to help you figure this out. So here's the model, okay? So this is a model that I developed pretty early on in my coaching practice when I realized that, we needed a framework, or a framework would be helpful for our clients to help them figure out their career direction. Instead of talking about things kind of floating around in the air, having something tangible and practical for them to latch on to structure their thinking was going to be useful. So that's where this came about. So we'll go through this for just a moment. So we talked about fulfillment already. We always want you to start with the fulfillment piece first for the reasons I referenced. So think of this model as kind of building blocks, if you will, where you're brainstorming ideas as you go, and then you're starting to narrow them down a little bit. So the fulfillment piece is about the meaning that you get out of the work that you do in some way, shape, or form. You start with this one at the bottom. The other thing that you need to consider and think about to determine if you're in the right fit or not is, am I performing tasks on a regular enough basis that are enjoyable to me? And the difference, by the way, between fulfillment and enjoyment is kind of like the icing on the cake. So I'll use me as an example, easiest way to describe this. So I actually enjoy and kind of have a knack for marketing and communications. And I also, same thing for writing and editing articles. I just enjoy it, and part of my degree from Vanderbilt University as undergrad was in communications. So that's something that I enjoyed just kind of naturally. Well, guess what? I had a job in marketing and communications earlier in my 20s, and I absolutely hated it because you need to think about your career as like a pie, if you will, and you need to determine, okay, what are the ideal tasks that I am good with or would be excited about performing for the majority of the time? What's the big piece of the pie? And that's what the fulfillment is. So for me, what I discovered is coaching is something, and advising people on their career and getting to know them in an authentic way, that's something I can do all day, every day, right? But as a business owner, I actually get a chance to do the marketing and communications and writing, but it's a smaller piece of my career pie. I don't want to do that all day, every day. It doesn't give me enough of a sense of meaning and fulfillment. It's something that's fun, like icing on the cake, okay? So the enjoyment piece is something where you want to think about this from a different lens and say, all right, if I'm not getting enough meaning from my work, are there at least some tasks that I enjoy performing? And what are those? And should I be doing those the majority of the time instead? That can give you some career ideas. Next, we want you to look at and identify and understand what your strengths are, your top 3 to 5 strengths. And are you leveraging those strengths that you want to leverage on a regular basis in your current job? If the answer is no, it's not a right fit for you. Now, the one thing that we want to point out about strengths is that sometimes we have strengths and we're sick of using them and we don't want to perform those tasks anymore, and that's okay. So what you want to say to yourself when you're filling out the strengths portion here is you want to identify the strengths that not only you have, but you actually want to leverage on a consistent basis. You still enjoy using them. Then we move up to education and experience. So one of the questions to ask yourself is, does this job leverage or use my past education at University of Chicago or my past experience? Now, in some cases, you may say, I don't really care as much about that. But we need you to ask yourself this question because it's a critical piece, because some people will say, well, actually, I did like some classes, in college, and I'm not using that strength or skill or, playing into that interest at all anymore. Maybe that's a career idea I could consider. And with your past experience, we all want to feel like we're contributing and we're valuable in some way, shape, or form to our organization. So even if you're thinking about transferable experience that would move over to a different area or different industry or role, we still want you to consider that. So we all want to have these pieces in play to a certain extent, even if some of them are a smaller percentage. The next thing you need to think about is whether your job fits your personality type. This is a really big one. I actually had a job a long time ago that I was kind of forced or needed to be more of an extrovert than I am. So I'm actually 60% introvert and 40% extrovert. I joke that I can pose as an extrovert when I need to. But after I do webinars like this or speaking engagements in person, I need a little downtime because I'm actually more introverted. Your personality type makes a huge difference. The job that I had before where I was forced or needed to be more of an extrovert, I was exhausted at the end of the day. So with personality type, everyone, you need to think about how introverted or extroverted you are, and does your job give you the right amount of time to be that person, one balance of the scale versus the other? Are you more of a leader, but you're more in a detail-oriented kind of, worker bee role right now, and that's part of the problem. So you need to think about lots of different elements of your personality type, because if your personality is rubbing against the role that you're in with the people that you work with, or the culture and environment of the organization, which is where we start to move over here, then you're not going to be satisfied and it's not the right fit. So the last two pieces are to consider, am I in the right work environment? Now, with COVID, working remotely, all bets are off. It's different, obviously. So in this case, think about the people, think about the values of the organization, the mission, et cetera, okay? Are you in the right culture or work environment for you? This is a make or break. We have had clients come to us, and at the end of the process, they basically realize, you know what? I'm in the right job. The role that I play is the right one. I enjoy, my coworkers, et cetera, but I just don't agree with the values of the organization, and I'm going to leave. And that's a completely reasonable reason to leave if it's rubbing against your values that much, okay? So work environment can be one of the main things that's the problem. And in a way, this is good news if that's the case, because that means that if you change into a different organization but same role in industry, that could be the right fix. And then finally, last but not least for sure, is compensation. Is one of the issues for you about or related to your satisfaction the compensation? You don't feel you're being valued enough, whether it's salary-wise or otherwise. Compensation is a critically important thing. We all have to pay our bills. But we leave compensation till the end with our clients because, as I said at the beginning, we want you to really brainstorm and think big picture first with these other pieces, and then get practical, narrow down your ideas, getting practical with these other, concepts of compensation, et cetera, okay? So how would we, or I suggest you use the model? I would literally print it out and go step by step with it in the order that we just described and say to yourself, okay, how fulfilled am I here? Pros and cons. How much do I enjoy the tasks and the projects I work on? Again, pros and cons there. And go through each of the pieces of the model. And if you find, for example, at the end, there's only 2 pieces out of whack, you can say to yourself, okay, do I need to can I make changes where I am with these 2 pieces? Or if I can't, let me try to do so, at least for a little while, see what happens. But that may mean that maybe I just need a different role within my current organization. Again, this gives you the framework to be practical and realistic about what exactly is really going on and going wrong for you, and how many pieces are actually not a fit. If it's a lot, okay, you need to make a more dramatic change. If it's not that many, it might be a smaller change, okay? So our last poll here, Sam, if we can pull up this last one, I did want to talk about career assessments for just a moment, because some of you may have taken a career assessment before, and you may be like, this kind of sounds like, what Hallie's talking about. So we're curious about this, if you can complete that poll for us. And I did want to let you all know that career assessments are useful, but I'll explain to you in just a moment when we're done with the poll why they're a little bit limited at the same time.
So it looks like 63% of folks on the line have not yet taken a career assessment.
Okay, all right, great. So thank you guys. And thanks, Sam, for sharing. So here's the deal, everyone. Career assessments are great. We like them. We find that the results are very valid and valuable. They give you a lot of information in a short period of time that is accurate. But if you've ever taken a career assessment or are considering taking one, you have to keep in mind that they only test you for 1 or 2 of the pieces of the puzzle. It doesn't cover every piece. So just a quick example, let me go back here for a moment. Most career assessments, they'll test you for example, your strengths, but that's kind of all they're saying. So all of these other pieces you need to figure out on your own. Some career assessments like Myers-Briggs and DISC, they'll talk to you about your personality type. So again, they're very helpful and we recommend them, but keep in mind, everyone, don't see it as this magic wand like, oh, it's all going to be perfect and I'm going to know my answer, because the career assessments are usually not telling you a thing about the work environment, nothing about compensation, et cetera, et cetera. So do use them, but use them in conjunction with what we talked about today, okay? I did want to mention an offer that we wanted to give you guys too that will help you really fill out the model and figure out your career direction once and for all. So when I developed our model, I also realized, like I said, because I'm a writer and I enjoy that, I was like, okay, well, we need a workbook, of course, right? So I also wrote this workbook that is built around the model to help people fill out the model for themselves in the quickest, easiest way possible for them. Happy to offer you all who are listening in later and on the call today half price on the workbook. It's fantastic. We get rave reviews on it. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but we've been using this for over 15 years now, and it helps you figure out the right career path. It's fantastic. So if you'd like to take advantage of that, you can use this code on our website. If there's any issues with it, or it's easier for you to just email us, we can send you all of the information that you need. But our workbook helps you complete the career model in enough depth that you figure things out. But it's also part of what I like about it is I tend to be a very direct to the point person. There's not a lot of fluff. It just tells you exactly what you need to do. It is a working document. All right. So finally, before we get to action items that I want you all to write down for yourselves, and also additional questions, our Q&A portion. I did want you to keep in mind, obviously this is COVID time. Now, I will say that and let you know that there are places out there hiring. We have had at least, I just talked to a client today who got a brand new job at WebMD just in the past week. We've had clients all throughout COVID get new jobs. So at least 10, maybe 12 people since COVID started, they got a new job and they made a change in transition. So it is possible to do so. There are places that are hiring, but at the same time, we want you to be smart and practical and realistic and consider these things on the slide. If because of COVID, it's not the right time for you to make a move. You want to kind of read the room, so to speak, of your organization and industry before you just make a dramatic change. How are things going within my industry? Are things struggling? So I need to kind of take my time with this, right? Is your company or organization actively hiring? Are other places actively hiring, or has it really been hit by what's going on? And if it's been hit, what are the related kind of careers or industries that you could consider that haven't been hit as much by COVID? And then the other thing that you can do is, if it's not a good time for you to make a change, and it might take you a while to actually do so, consider what else can make you happy if you can't make a change right away. Do you want to ask for more flex time, or can you take a little bit more flex time? Do you really need that when you're working remotely because, you know, kids or whatever else is going on? Do you want to ask for instead like a title change when your performance review comes up? Do you want to ask for a small bonus now, or even just ask for a bonus later on? So think about other things that you could ask for that may help you feel a little bit better in the meantime while you're considering and pondering what kind of change you need to make and what the right time frame is. This goes back to what I said earlier, and let's start to think about our action items, but this goes back to what I said earlier about remember that small changes can actually have a really big impact. So think about this, small changes, big results, okay? So next, I'd like you to think about, and get out your pen and paper, everyone, and think about 2 action steps that you will take in the next week to move towards figuring out if you're in the right fit or not and what kind of move or change you might need to make. It could be, I want to review the model. It could be, I want to think about and write about what success looks like for me and see how that lines up with where I am. It could be taking advantage of the free consult that we offered. Happy to do that as well if that's something that would be useful for you. So let's start to move towards Q&A as well. And by the way, in the Q&A box, please feel free to share any other tips or insights or comments that you have, as well as any of your action items, because we love to hear ideas from people, and it helps you with accountability and just good for the engagement overall. So Sam, let's go ahead and we'll start to get to our Q&A. I'm going to open it up, but I'm going to only read kind of as you do, Sam, just because I'll get ahead of myself and confuse myself.
No problem. And thank you so much. This is really wonderful and so helpful. So we'll jump in with a few questions here, and please, everyone on the line, continue to submit questions. We've got a good 15 minutes here of Q&A. So here's one. What if you don't find your manager to be a good leader? Perhaps this person likes a lot of the things about their job and their role, but doesn't connect directly and very well with their manager.
Oh, great question. So if the manager is really, really bad, which it doesn't sound like that's the case, it's like I don't connect as well. One of the first things I would consider, if everything else, like we said with the model, is really good, is there someone else in your organization that you could identify as like a mentor to kind of connect with them instead, or even outside of your organization that helps give you whatever might be missing from your manager as a leader? I would consider that first, because that would be a good kind of easy, safe step given everything else is going on. Great question.
Thanks. We've got a reader on the line, and I imagine we've got a lot more as well. Allison says she found the book, What Color is Your Parachute, helpful. Do you agree? And perhaps can you share any other resources that you have, books that people can pick up for some light reading during this time?
I know, light reading, right? Because a lot of times that's what we have time to do. So that one is good. I actually really like the Strengths Finder 2.0, that book. because I find it's really useful. You get a code in the back of the book so then you can take the test, which I think is really cool because I like quizzes, like I said. But understanding what your strengths are and how they describe how you can leverage your strengths is really helpful to help you define what that current piece is and see if you're using your time wisely and leveraging your strengths. Another book that I have found is very good is called The Pathfinder. That's another one too that is more similar to What Color is Your Parachute. So thanks for sharing that. That's great.
Along the same lines, when it comes to resources, you mentioned Strength Finder. Do you have any other assessment tools or platforms that you recommend? And this question asks specifically about learning about strengths.
Yeah, so we like the Strength Finder assessment itself. And then there's another one, and it's still out there. I believe the initial for a few of your results is free. Is literally assessment.com, just the word assessment.com. That is also a career-specific assessment. And the reason why we like that one, too, is because it does match you up with possible career ideas. Again, the free part of it is only going to give you a certain amount of results, but it's still valuable and useful for that part. And we like that it matches you up. Remember, though, it might match you up with things that you don't have an interest in. You got to, take it with a grain of salt and put it into the model, like we said. That's a good question.
Thank you. And here's a question about trying to decide what comes next. Noah says, as I look at my career, I'm debating whether to continue down the individual, contributor path, or perhaps moving into a managerial role with a team. What factors should I consider as I make that big decision?
Great one. A lot of different factors. One of the first things I would do, though, honestly, is I would talk to other managers and kind of informational interview them, so to speak, even if it's informally, about, what they think about being a manager, because that's going to help you understand, especially at your organization, what it takes and what is involved with that. I would also talk with friends and family who are managers as well, because there are certain strengths and things that come with being a manager that are important that we don't always have. And I'll be honest with you, not to turn you off of it at all, but we've had some clients say to us, I don't want to be a manager because I don't want to deal with the people issues. Some people are intimidated by that and just don't want to have that as part of their day. So that's definitely something that you want to consider and think about as well. Great question.
A lot of self-reflection that goes into making that decision. Here's another question about engaging with your manager. And I think this is a great one that a lot of people will relate to. How do I engage my current manager in helping me transition to a different team within the company?
Yeah,
tricky situation.
Well, it is tricky. And the thing is that if this person, or since they're asking it, that means that they feel at least a little bit comfortable approaching your manager. So if you feel good about talking with your manager about this, in any way, shape, or form, that's a good start. It means you have a solid, kind of more direct relationship. Here's the deal. One way or the other, regardless of what it is, what I would do is focus on how you can contribute to the organization in a different way, maybe in an improved way, because this would leverage your strengths in a better or different way. So I would take a positive spin on it and talk about the value that you can provide in the different area versus complaining about why you don't like where you are or why it's not working. So see it as, I'm thinking about the long term and what my next step might be. And I would be, I'm thinking that I'd be enthusiastic about this, this, and this. And I think I can bring great value in this way. So approach it with the positive, with a long-range perspective. And again, the value you can provide versus, negative about why it doesn't work where you are. Great question.
Thank you. Here is one that I've heard from a lot of young alumni in particular that I've worked and spoken with. I don't feel fulfilled in my job, but I've only been there for 2 years. Does it hurt me to leave my job after 2 years? How will future employers perceive that on my resume? And Hallie, I would even say maybe after a year. I hear that the question of should I leave? Can I leave after just 1 year? All the time. Would love your thoughts on that.
Great question. So while it's not ideal to have in any sort of short stint, here's the good news, especially with COVID and everything else, and just the way the economy is, there's the idea of like the gig economy, right, that experts are talking about. that people are like taking short stints at different places. It's just more common and a little bit more acceptable. So what I would say is take the time regardless to make sure that your next step is the right step for you, and that you really know that's the right thing. And that it's only been 2 years, I honestly think it's fine. It's about what you say to the prospective employer, the next person, what you say in your cover letter, what you say during the course of your interviews, okay? So I really do think 2 years is okay. 1 year, I think, obviously is less ideal. But here's the thing. I would never tell someone to stay in a job that is so miserable for them, especially to the point of if like it's making them so stressed out they're getting sick or whatever, like stay for another year. No way. A lot of the time it's about, the story and the kind of the message that you're putting out there about why you left, okay? Because people do understand that things happen. So that's the short answer.
Thank you. And here's another question about making a move. Do you have any advice for folks who want to change positions, change industries, but don't want to start back at an entry-level role? They're mid-career and want to take advantage of the experience that they have and don't want to start at the beginning while being able to make a change?
Great question. That's a fear that a lot of people have, and completely understand that. The way that you navigate around it is you're, identifying and targeting the right roles and, the right type of organization, size of organization, et cetera, because that can make a difference about where they're going to bring you in, right? This is where, though, networking is going to be really important so that you can, explain more effectively what your transferable skills are. So bottom line is, with this kind of scenario, you really want to get good at identifying and articulating what your transferable skills are and why your experience where you are now or where you have been is actually relatable and transfers over to the new direction that you're headed. So you have to articulate things in a different way on your resume and LinkedIn, talking about the same experience, but just having a different perspective on it. So it is possible to do that. You've just got to be thoughtful and methodical about it. Great question. That's a good one.
Just one about going back to school. I know that, I've read a lot about how in 2008, when the economy was struggling, a lot of folks decided to go back and get another graduate degree. And that cycle is starting over again now. When does a return to graduate school make sense? It's a big commitment, financial and time commitment. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think that once you've decided, and if you've decided that grad school is the way to go, that it's going to get you to the next step that you want to be in, I would start right away, honestly, especially during COVID. In a way, this is kind of a good time to do that. The thing that you really need to think about is ensuring that that's the right next step for you. And you can't kind of get around it if, for example, it's not a great time or financially it's not a good commitment for you to make. So once you've made that choice and are ready to pull the trigger, if you really think that, okay, that's going to help me get to the next level, the only other thing that you want to think about is if I'm, the experience I'm going to get, like starting right away versus next fall, for example, if you feel that whatever's going on at your organization and what kind of projects are coming down the pipeline, if that experience is going to be really valuable for you in the long run, then you may want to sit tight and wait till then. So you kind of got to weigh the pros and cons there a little bit. Great question.
That's a big decision for sure. Here's a question from someone who I think this will resonate with a lot of people about feeling vulnerable in the era of COVID-19 in their jobs. George says, my boss has moved on and left the company. She hired me, I'm working remote, and now I feel worried and vulnerable should the company consider cutbacks. What should I do? Is it time to move on?
Yeah, so I would do two things. Number one, I would think about what are the things that you could be doing now in terms of classes and et cetera to kind of shore up and refresh any of your skills and strengths so that you're preparing yourself just in case something does happen. So kind of do an inventory of where am I a little bit rusty and what are some of the strengths that I would like to kind of brush up on. And I would honestly, I don't think you have to get into, hardcore job search mode right now, but given that something could happen, I'd rather people be prepared than not. So I would start to get your resume up to speed, LinkedIn, et cetera, slowly but surely, to prepare for a search just in case. And as part of that, start to identify positions out there and organizations that you might want to be targeting. And once you've got those balls rolling, starting to network with people a little bit to let them know that, just to put the line in the water out there, I may need to start to look sooner than later just to be safe. Absolutely.
It's great advice. There are some action steps you can take today to feel a little bit more of a sense of security. That's great. And we'll do one last question here. As a business owner yourself, do you have any tips if someone is looking to start their own business, but they just don't really know where to start?
First of all, figure out exactly what kind of business you want to start. You don't have to know all the nitty-gritty about it, but at least, okay, what kind it is that you're wanting to do. And I would honestly take the path or approach that I did. So I had a job, full-time job, when I started my coaching company. And then I was actually fortunate enough, I was able to reduce the hours there, so I had a little bit more flex time while I was growing the organization. So basically, I would try to do it on the side as a start, just to give you that kind of safety net, okay? And I honestly wish I had taken like starting a business or an entrepreneur or running a business class at the time. I never did, and I had my master's degree, but it wasn't an MBA. So reading one of those books, like How to Start a Small Business, for Dummies, that sounds silly, but I've had clients actually read that book and they found it to be enormously helpful. So those are a couple of things that I would consider doing too.
We've got some lifelong learners on the call, so I'm sure the reading and research fits well, resonates.
Exactly.
All right, well, Hallie, thank you so much for sharing these actionable tips on this important topic and for grounding it in the context of COVID. I think that was really helpful and a really great presentation.
Most welcome.
And thank you so much to, thank you so much to everyone for participating on this call. We really appreciate you joining us today.